Gentlemen, it's been a good 8 months since the Draft Defense Acquisition Procedures 2026 came out. I thought it was time that we had a look at it till the time the DAP 2026 does not come out. It'll give us a small little grounding to expect as to what would happen. In the course of around 4 or 5 sessions, I will cover the important provisions and the procurement category, which shall give you an overview of what we could expect in the DAP 2026. I believe there will be a large number of changes in from the draft. In fact, I hope there will be, because as I go on, though my aim is not to criticize the DAP 2026 as it is formed right now in the draft fashion, but there are certain amount of problems that would be created by this in a procurement process. And I thought that it was time that we went on to better things and faster procurement, the need of the hour.
In Session 1 of the Draft DAP 2026, I intend to bring you a small snapshot of what the DAP 2026 envisages and what does it bring to us. The planning process, basically the changes in it, as well as an outline of the capital acquisition scheme as envisaged in the DAP 2026.
Now I will cover a small snapshot of 4 slides on the important provisions of draft DAP 2026 and what does it bring us in terms of empowering defense procurement, and how is it different to the previous version of DAP 2020. Keep in mind that the draft for the DAP is in 2 parts. The first part is 250 to 300 pages odd, and part 2 is another 500 pages. That makes it 800 pages, an increase of almost 75 pages over the previous version. Don't be fooled by part 1 because it is not the full DAP. The annexures and the appendixes are extremely important to the student of the defense acquisition procedures, as well as the people who want to follow defense procurement. You can strategize, you can conceptualize, you can do what you want to do. But when it comes down to the brass tacks of procurement, then you have to be a master in that particular segment of DAP of the defense acquisition procedure. And DAP 2026 is an enabling document in many spheres, which is important to know. So 4 slides to tell you what does DAP 2026 do differently, or what does the draft do differently, and what are the key shifts from the DAP 2024 to the draft fashion presently that there is. The first major shift is the metric of success is not just make in India, but it is also owned in India. Now, make has transformed that not only make it, but also own it. So there is a window available for getting technology from abroad as long as you own it. We shall get into it. Now, what it does is it moves away from traditional transfer of technology concept that we used to employ. We use this in a large number of procurement procedures previously, and a famous one is the APFSDS round for the T72 125mm, which we took in the Mango project. And frankly speaking, it didn't go anywhere because the transfer of technology was not sufficient enough for it to be made in India in this kind of in a complete fashion, and therefore it was not owned by India. So these transfer of technology created perpetual dependency on the foreign country, and that perpetual dependency is aimed to transform into co-development of the particular equipment and IP ownership with India, which becomes extremely important. Now, what does IP ownership imply? That there will have to be a retention of source codes, the critical design data, upgrade authorities, within the Indian entities, whether government or private, which are authorized to produce it in India or manufacture it in India. That is extremely important. Otherwise, you have a Rafale without the source code, and therefore integration of various other missile system or integration into the complete IRSR capability, which gives it a greater amount of capability, you're obviated from it. So the policy direction has seen a distinct shift from excluding foreign participation more about, and now it is more about mitigating long-term capability locks by the foreign participant and preserving our life cycle sovereignty over key defense assets. So you don't exclude them, but while you're included them, you ensure that you do not have the locks that they can impose on you on future of the development of the equipment or future ownership of the equipment. Now, there are a large number of COTS items which are available, which a little bit of customization that can be made into military grade equipment. And that for this draft DAP 2026 aims at looking at advanced civil technology being converted into military capability, and therefore COTS items, Indian COT items being bought off the shelf. Long-term sustainability and life cycle concept has been introduced in the cost consideration in acquisition planning. So it is not going to be the simple L1 in terms of the pure cost. The sustainability and the life cycle cost has also been introduced into it. In the category categorization, there used to be a category known as Buy Indian and a Buy and Make Indian. Now, both the categories have been merged to make it a single category of Buy Indian, Manufacture in India category, which simplifies the procurement landscape from a 5 to a 4 procurement category. The strategic partnership model, accordingly, in line with the sync of the thinking, the bidder is to ensure that the intellectual property rights for the platform design is licensed in perpetuity by the license IPR owner to the MOD. So this is a departure from the previous licensing requirement where it used to be for the full life cycle of the platform and subsequent upgrades. Now it is in perpetuity to it. And there is a new system that has been added more than what they were, the 4 that were there. So niche technology systems with strategic implications have been added into the categories which are included in the strategic partnership model. The indigenous content thresholds have been raised across the board. In the Buy Indian IDDM category, the IC content has been raised from the previous 50% to 60% now. And what used to happen is that a vendor could just pick up an equipment from abroad with 0% of indigenous content, produce it for trials, and thereafter indigenize it after clearing the trials, getting the contract, and therefore indigenize it to 50% IC content across the board in all deliveries. Now, what has been imposed is to ensure this backdoor entry is closed. A new 30% indigenous content at the trial stage has to be ensured by the vendor concerned. So the vendor can't just pick up equipment from abroad and produce it for trials and thereafter try and indigenize it after being successful as the L1 and therefore create problems in the delivery where he does not achieve the indigenous content imposed of previous 50%, which now is 60%. Now, in the buy global category, there used to be offsets on procurement greater than 2,000 crores. These offsets have been removed. And the procurement category continues to carry 30% indigenous content. What used to happen is that in case there were offset being there was 0% indigenous content that was supposed to be provided by the foreign vendor concerned. Now, since offsets have been removed, it is 30%. He will have to provide as indigenous content rather than offsets. Now, incentivization has been introduced for indigenous content in whichever IC categories which are non-mandatory. So wherever IC is non-mandatory, you will have an incentive in case if you provide the vendor provides the IC content based on the quantity that is there. Now the credibility of the IC content used to be a big bugbear because the vendor used to claim it was up to the MOD whether to carry out the inspection or not, and large volume of things used to flow under the bridge. So now a new undertaking formats and a committee-based verification mechanism has been introduced into the draft DAP, which are designed to achieve full clarity in this. And if the vendor is unable to meet the IC content, he will be penalized. He can be banned in case false certification has been given to them. So all these things are being introduced into it. For the first time, the draft DAP 2026 introduces the indigenous design. Till now, we talked about indigenous design, but we never had checks and procedures and rewards for indigenous design. Now it is ensured in the draft that Indian design and developed systems will achieve priority in the procurement decisions. So whenever you go for the AON, these will have priority, which are indigenously designed. And indigenous verification shall be carried out, which is now mandatory, and it shall be linked to penalties. There was enhanced performance parameters in DAP 2024 as well as in DAP 2020 also. The credit score was just 10%. It was very minuscule because why I say it is that major technology to be introduced into the equipment and being given just a 10% price advantage over its competitors was very less. And each attribute, say an accuracy, was just 3%. So no vendor was willing to pitch in money into R&D to develop advanced technology and be given just a small price advantage of 10% and 3% for the attribute. Now this has been further incentivized to 20% price advantage and each attribute carrying 5% instead of the 3%. Another problem used to be that out of all the competing vendors, you always used to have one odd competing vendor which did not provide the equipment on time as legislated. As a result, the rest of the vendors were waiting for that defaulting vendor to provide it, and the defaulting vendor kept asking for extensions, creating problems in the entire process, elongating the complete procurement cycle. Now, non-submission of the EOT for trial will carry 50% of the earnest money deposit penalty. It's not a major sum because earnest money deposit is not much, but at least it is a start to it, and a defaulting vendor will be penalized for it. Previously, I used to say that actually the trials is a system of holding the vendor to ransom. Ransom in the sense that he provided the equipment, and now you can carry out trying it at no cost, no commitment basis. Now, what has happened is that a vendor which has successfully qualified in trials will get 10% of the unit cost of L1, not his, of L1, or 10 crore, whichever is less as the compensation for providing his equipment for trials. Though minor sum, it is not major, but at least it reduces the financial risk for companies, especially small companies. It's a start, and I hope this shall incentivize the vendors accordingly. The draft DAP also introduces major changes in the development track. Now, these are things that were very important for actually the defense procurement to be incentivized at the lower level of development of IDEX innovations, etc. Now, the IDEX innovation for defense excellence, which actually started off as an experiment, which has gained major success. The timelines have been compressed from what was earlier given and read out here, which is 22 weeks. It has been further been compressed to 14 weeks, making much faster than what it was, a 36% reduction. Also, liquidated damages, for example, the vendor was not able to deliver in time. The liquidated damages used to be at 5%. Now, these have been capped at 3%. So the financial implications for him for late delivery becomes far lesser. The Make One funding, which was earlier only for 250 crore per development agency, has been increased. 250 crore was very minor for any kind of a prototype development. This has been increased to 400 crore. There are other provisions to it, which shall we come here, but the cap has been increased. The earnest money deposit always used to be a problem for MSMEs and startups which are cash strapped. Now, these earnest money development will have exemption to a ceiling limit for MSMEs and startup, and therefore there would not be any finance lock-in for them, which became a major problem at the bidding stage for them. Now, what has been introduced is a very good concept, which is the spiral development model. And this is for the MAKE project, the IDEX, as well as for the DRDO projects. Now, what would happen is that the SQR would be made, or the PSQR would be made in a stage fashion of achievement, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. At each stage of development, there would be a limited procurement. The SQR would be raised for the next cycle of procurement, which the vendor would have to be done, and the second cycle of procurement would take place. Therefore, there would be a stage increase in SQR with stage procurement at each stage as given in the RFP. This is extremely good because you can't expect a high technology equipment or a system project to be able to reach the apex level of requirements at the word go. There would be development in each stage. So this development would take too long. Therefore, the financial outgo to the company would be very less. It would be cash trapped for a long time. With stage procurement and stage upgradation of technology, you would have a monitoring of the complete system, a progressive increase in the equipment, as well as a stage procurement for the vendor to continue in a cycle for R&D and for an increase in performance. Also, if the prototype does not meet 100% of the laid down SQR, there is a provision for reducing the SQR oblique a stage performance for procurement to be introduced in the procurement cycle. Now, startup and MSMEs previously used to provide, all vendors used to provide bank guarantees and insurance bond, etc., as against advance payment. Now, in this, the startup and MSMEs have been given the right for IP, intellectually property rights mortgage, in lieu of bank guarantees and insurance security bonds. As such, the finance lock-in will not take place of these companies which are cash strapped. Now, what used to happen is that the IDEX winner used to produce a particular equipment, order used to be given to him. But he wanted long-term orders, and that was what was right. He's produced the equipment, he's developed the equipment. So therefore, from a particular IDEX winner, guaranteed 5 years procurement shall be carried out from him and from no one else, as long as he continues meeting the requirement and he does not get into insolvency. In the innovation category, now it is mandatory to procure the minimum pilot order quantity. That shall be mandatory. This minimum pilot order quantity will be laid out in the RFP, and that in the innovation category will be mandatory. Any IDEX product or the Technological Development Fund project which has the potential for next level development can be graduated to the Make One project where it shall receive funding of up to 400 crores. So any deserving project that comes up in the IDEC TDS can be upgraded, funded, and therefore followed on. Now, what also has been introduced is a formalized technological readiness level as well as the manufacturing readiness level, both at the time of its development as well as the time of its manufacture. At the RFI stage, request for information stage itself, and this shall be reflected in the annual acquisition plan, a TRL shall be imposed as to what technological readiness level we want of the particular product. And therefore, the categorization shall be based on the TRL. Each one of the category would have a TRL imposed on it if we wish to get into that category. Now, a 4 to 5 TRL in a Buy Indian IDDM was mandated. But if the vendor can produce a DRL of 6 to 9, he is eligible to become an ab initio single vendor. The government financial regulations call for a multi-vendor right at the inception stage. But if he's producing a high level of technology, a high level of innovation of TRL 6 to 9 as against 5 to 6, 4 to 5, he can be an ab initio single vendor. That is, he has an equipment which is not only in the design stage of 4 to 5, but it is in a readiness model to be tried out of high technological readiness. There would be accredited agencies which are entitled to check the TRL and the manufacturer readiness level of the particular equipment. A lovely chapter has been introduced into the draft DAP 2026. In fact, it is my belief that this low cost capital acquisition, which has been introduced as a new chapter, should actually be included in all procurement across the board in DAP 2026. I'm sure in future drafts of it, such provision shall be there. Now, what is this all about? Now, it is very simple. The SHQ wants a particular equipment. So it tries the equipment in a small quantity, a maximum order of 75 crores, before and during the time it does in-service trials of this equipment after the procurement of 75 crores. It can then go in for bulk acquisition, greater amount of the order if it finds it successful. So it is a try before you buy provision for the buyer, that is the SHQ. Now, what it does to the vendor concerned is it is a foot into the door. He has equipment, especially startups, MSMEs, etc. It's got a equipment. It doesn't know what to do with it, how to get into it. So here a small quantity can be brought. It can be exploited. That is a total maximum of 75 crore. It can be exploited operationally. The SHQ is satisfied, go straight for bulk procurement without further trials. And this is extremely important. Without further trials. So it's a foot in the door for the vendor. He's got into it and thereafter can get into better bulk procurement and finances coming back to him. For a startup, it's a major issue which has got no service record of previous defense procurement, etc. And it is a massive de-risking pathway with fruits at the other end of the tunnel should it meet the requirement. I think this is something which the industry should follow, encourage, and ensure that this kind of a low cost capital acquisition does not drop because of lack of interest on part of the industry to pursue it and produce the equipment, improve the equipment as during the in-service exploitation of the equipment. Also with this, there is a suo motu clause. A startup can approach the service headquarters with its products. Now, when it approaches it, the SHQ is mandated to invite challengers through its portal for 30 days. 30 days the invite goes. Even if challengers emerge, what is more important is that the quantity can be split between two or more vendors. However, the original proposer of the suo motu proposer gets the first right to match the lowest bid. That means he will be given the contract in case he can deliver it at the L1 rate. He may not be L1, but if he delivers at L1, the suo motu proposer has the right to get the contract. In this, the AON has a validity of only 2 months for the low cost capital acquisition. That means the vendor has to have the product. This will be a challenge for all vendors to meet, especially startup MSMEs, which actually depend upon finances to produce a particular product. And this is as compared to 6 months AON validity for the regular Indian buy cases. Now, this shall be a challenge. I think there will be a rethink to this. The long-term bulk acquisition is an interesting thing that has been introduced. It is purchase in tranches with increasing SQR, similar to spiral development. So at each stage of tranche of procurement, you got an increase in SQR taking place. The field evaluation trials is carried out for the first tranche of procurement, and thereafter, with the increasing tranches, limited validation trials are carried out for the essential aspects of the upgradation in the SQR that has taken place for subsequent tranches. Leasing. In leasing, a damp lease has been introduced. Previously, we used to have a wet lease in which you had to take the maintenance, everything, the man handling the equipment, everything. It was very expensive. Or you had the dry lease in which nothing was taken but the asset. At times you were high and dry. What to do with the asset? You did not have the maintenance capability of the asset. Now, what happens is that in between, a damp lease has been introduced, which offsets the maintenance capability and the expense required for a wet lease as against the maintenance requirement for not being there for a dry lease. So the lessee can pick, the SHQ can pick whatever services that you want for the asset concerned. You may not want the person to operate the equipment, but you want the maintenance of the equipment. Therefore, the costing of that equipment will come. It's somewhere between the expense of a wet lease and the lack of add-ons of dry lease. A two-stage trial has been introduced. In stage one, the essential performance parameters and the essential technical parameters shall be tested out. The contract shall be given, and the balance of the aspect can be taken up after the contract is being executed in the first of production model. What has also been given is what was enshrined in the QA manual, but now it has been encapsulated into the draft DAP 2026, is that the SHQ will have the right to choose the mode of QA trials. Not that it wasn't there, it was there in the QA manuals. But what used to happen is that the quality assurance agencies at times used to insist on trial parameters, the degree of difficulty being far more than what was being desired. And therefore, it became a problem for the acceptance of the equipment at the time when it did not meet the stringent QA requirement. Now, having been encapsulated in the manual itself, in the defense procurement acquisition procedures, it becomes incumbent for the QA to follow the lead of the SHQ to tell them what is the degree of difficulty required for that particular trials. Now, self-certification and third-party certification was always there. However, there's a transition now to the acceptability of there. Therefore, the transition is from the QA testing by government inspection to certification. Obviously, it is easier, it's more difficult than what is written, because what happens is you do not have the defense testing infrastructure system all in place. You got a paucity of defense testing infrastructures available, and therefore even the certification becomes a problem. But this intent is very clear that self-certification and third-party certification shall be accepted as against a detailed checking of everything from QA agencies. Now, systems upgrade very fast, especially software. A simple thing, you want a simulator which has got a screen. I encountered a problem where CRD screen was written in the RFP, but the vendor said that I do not have a CRD screen. It's not available in the market. I provide LED screen. We had major problems to carry out amendment to the contract in this particular aspect. Now, upgrades, especially in case of software, such software changes very often, has been introduced into the DAP 2026 or the draft version of it for fast evolving systems that are there. And majority of the systems have got IT content, got software, etc., where such a provision is extremely important.
We now come to the planning process as encapsulated in the draft DAP 2026. It remains by and large the same thing that was there in the DAP 2024, except for certain some changes that have taken place, amalgamating certain steps. I will highlight only the changes that take place from the earlier DAP 2020 in the draft of 2026. The planning process has been shifted from a three-stage phase program into a two-stage process. And the annual acquisition plan remains the most critical as it is carved out to meet the short-term requirements. So what happened is that previously we had a long-term and a medium-term perspective. This was in the 10 years integrated capability development plan. Now the two 5-year plans, which were the long term and the mid term, have been amalgamated. They were known as the defense capital acquisition plans. They have been merged. Both the part 1 and the part 2 have been merged to make a single plan, which is the 10-year integrated capability development plan. So we no longer have a 5-year plan. Now this is done by the headquarter IDS in consultation with the SHQ every 5 years. The technological perspective and capability roadmap remains over there, and this is used for defining of the problem definition statement. Now this document is made public and is available to the industry to plan for their development of products to meet the timelines and the product requirement of the SHQs. The final approval is given by the DAC, Defense Acquisition Council, and the industry can utilize this. What is more important is while the capability development plan is not available to the industry, I feel it should be available to the industry. The TPCR is available. Now, based on this, the 2-year acquisition plan remains as it is, and the only change is that it is a draft. DAP is submitted by the SHQ to the headquarter IDS by the 31st of January each year, and this is vetted by all. And its approval takes place in the first defense procurement procedure of the new financial year. It remains important that the 2-year acquisition plan, which is a roll-on plan, it's a short-term perspective plan, it forms the basis for the initiation of each acquisition proposal for the acceptance of necessity. The 2-year annual acquisition plan used to consist of 4 sections previously. Part A remains the same, which are basically the all carryover acquisition proposals from the previous year and acceptance of necessities accorded during the present year. Part B, Part C, and Part D remain the same, the balance 3, which are Part B is buy schemes, Part C is the development schemes, and the Part D is the other capital procurement procedures. What has been introduced is the Part E and the Part F, which is signaling. It was there before. The Part E, which has been there as introduced, is the fast track procedure, which used to be part of the buy schemes. Now, as signaling, it been put separately. The fast track procedure has been a success in the previous years, and a vast majority of the defense budget has gone, or the defense procurement has gone to the fast track procedure. May not be monetarily, but qualitatively and quantitatively, yes. And the strategic partnership model, which was floundering, has now been made into a separate part, Part F. Now, proposals not included in the AAP may be initiated due to unforeseen situations, and the AON may be granted and amendments may be carried out. What is now important is that at the time of taking of the acceptance of necessity, and it has already been enshrined in the annual acquisition plan, is the maturity level of indigenous technology available based on the technological readiness level. So it is not only in the acceptance of necessity, this is maybe reflected in the AAP against each one of the acquisition proposals. Now I come to an outline of the capital acquisition schemes as envisaged in the DAP 2026 in the draft. Just an outline and the changes that have taken place from the 2024 DAP.
Okay, now let's have a look at the overlay. This, gentlemen, is the overlay which I have made. It's very simple. The DAP 2026 looks at capital acquisition. It's not the Defence Procurement Manual which looks after the revenue. They're two separate documents. A lot of people get confused and look at revenue procurement in the DAP. It's not there. It's in the Defence Procurement Manual, which was far simpler than the DAP till the time they revised it. A few years back, they made it more complicated than what it is now. Life is getting complicated. Now, what is the DAP-20? What is capital procurement? It is three types of procurement schemes. It is divided into buy, development, and additional procedures. So what is buy? Buy is, I've divided buy. It's not divided otherwise. Buy and buy and manufacture. It was buy and make first. It was buy and buy and make. That make has turned into manufacture. What is the buy? You can buy from an Indian design, development, manufacture, or you can buy global. What is manufacture added into it? That you buy it from the Indian manufacturer in India, or you buy it global and manufacture in India. That's about all. Nothing more than that. These are the fundamental four categories. That buy Indian has been knocked out. Buy Indian was a bugbear. You pick it up from abroad, bring it, try it out, put a stamp on it and say it's Indian. No way now. Development scheme remains the same. Make and innovation. Now make and innovation have been divided into separate chapters. Make is make 1, make 2, make 3, no changes except a few things, ingredients into it. Innovation remains IDEX, Innovation for Defense Excellence, Startups and MSME, Internal Organization, Technological Development Fund, which is the DRDO fund for DRDO products. And also you got the design and development, D&D by DRDO, DPSUs, and also from central research organizations of the government. OFP has been knocked out of the entire issue. Additional procedure. You have the long-term bulk acquisition. I talked about it in the summary. You got leasing. You got fast-track procedure, very important. You got the new chapter of the low-cost capital acquisition. You got the other capital procurement procedures, which are basically what used to happen on the revenue route, now has come into the capital. And you got the strategic partnership model. How do I look at it? I look at it slightly differently. I look at capital acquisition. What is capital acquisition? It's capability acquisition up north, or it is capability development. I have added another capability maintenance, other capital procurement procedure. It comes into the procedure of buying, but it is maintenance. Not that the other things can't maintain, they also have upgrades and things like that, but this is primarily for the purpose of maintenance of existing capability. I would also like to see strategic partnership model being taken out of additional procedure. If signaling is the issue, additional procedure you put it in, you're putting it into some sort of cold storage. I would like it to be taken out. It's a major issue into getting capability from the international market. I think we've realized this now. Major issues are coming into it. Make innovation and D&D may be pursued in isolation, in sequence, or in tandem with any one of the pure procurement category. No longer they can say that it is in this one, you don't buy it. It can be in tandem. This doesn't come through, the development comes through, the development doesn't come through, this will come through. So that is very much feasible to do so.
In the next session, I intend to cover the buy schemes and the development schemes in the new draft DAP 2026. These sessions of draft DAP 2026, as also the earlier chapters and sessions of DAP 2020, which are still relevant today and will continue to remain relevant, are available on the YouTube channel, my Google blog, Knowledge Enabler Defense Procurement, which is important because this is chronologically arranged, as well as the featured portion of my LinkedIn account. Please share it and please subscribe to the Google blog.